a very good morning to you all, and welcome to this Shift2Rail 2020 Info Day. My name is Caroline Kearney, and I'm looking forward to leading you through today's programme. So we're a little less people than imagined, and that's probably also due to the strike in France, but I'm sure a more intimate atmosphere will help the conversation. So we hope the programme will be full of useful information, opportunities to build new professional relationships, and that most of all, it will give us the tools to work together to transform the rail system. So let me firstly say that it's really wonderful to see you all here. We have stakeholders coming from startups, SMEs, larger companies, universities, as well as regional bodies from around 25 countries. So that represents an increase in the geographical coverage compared to our last Info Day. So I'm sure you'll think that's an encouraging result to get us started. Today's programme is aimed at providing you with an overview of the Research and Innovation programme, as well as all the information you will need to prepare your project proposals under our new upcoming 2020 call. The call is expected to be launched on the 7th of January, with an indicative deadline on the 21st of April. So by being here today, you are really giving yourself a head start and the best chance to be as ready, informed, and connected as possible. Elements we are sure will help you be successful in your applications. So, before I hand over to our speakers, just a few words about how you can engage with us today and make the most of the event. Throughout the day, you can share your ideas and join the conversation online by using our event hashtag S2RCall2020. To ask questions, there will be microphones circulating in the room, and I will make sure, time allowing, to stop after each speaker to allow you to intervene and join the conversation. Remember, if you don't get the chance to ask your questions this morning, there will be plenty of opportunities during the breaks and in the Riverside in the afternoon parallel sessions. Finally, we have many Shift2Rail staff with us here today. We are all wearing blue lanyards, so do please stop to talk to us and ask your questions. So, I believe we can now start with our introductory session, and we kick off with some welcoming words from Elizabeth Werner, Director of Land Transport at the European Commission's DG Move. She unfortunately couldn't be with us in person today, but nevertheless has this video message to share with us.
Good morning. I'm very happy to take the floor in the Shift2Rail Info Day, as today paves the way for a year full of activities for the Shift2Rail joint undertaking. 2020 is a very promising year for rail research and innovation, and we expect Shift2Rail to keep delivering, bringing innovations to the market. At the same time, we're of course also looking at the future of the partnership, and there is no better case than to show results and the confirmed interest from the industry to help us argue. The recently published Catalogue of Solutions shows that Shift2Rail is beginning to produce deliverables and demonstrators. The main objective of the annual work plan 2020 is to enrich this catalogue with more solutions and more demonstrators to swiftly prepare their transfer to the rail market. I cannot emphasize enough that ensuring a rapid and system-wide take-up of key innovations is a major objective of the innovation policy to benefit the citizens and the transport sector. With the future in mind, the 2020 call for proposals will address topics such as automation, robotics, artificial intelligence, intelligent asset management, cybersecurity, and the future rail system architecture. I want to give you a flavor of where the research should be heading and what the European Commission expects. Our objective is to ensure that the European railways are the preferred mobility choice for the future. They are already the greenest choice, but we need to make them more flexible and more cost-effective. Railways, as our most carbon-free transport mode, play a crucial role in achieving the Green Deal. Therefore, we need a more focused program with sustainability and digitalization and automation at its core, in particular for rail freight, which is the only short-term alternative for decarbonizing transport of heavy goods. Ladies and gentlemen and dear colleagues, I warmly encourage you to use the opportunity of this Info Day to ask questions, so that you are in the best possible conditions to join Shift2Rail's activities during 2020. One of our ambitions for the future is to have more diverse participants, geographically as well as more small companies and startups participating. Once the procedural and administrative steps are clear to you, I invite you to team up and to network. The Info Day is also the opportunity to meet with others, companies and researchers working on similar ideas, to build strong networks and consortia for new proposals. But remember, please, our biggest challenge in rail is getting the ideas rapidly deployed across the system to bring flexibility, reliability, and to reduce costs. My final message, therefore, is don't be shy, please ask, please apply.
Great. So, as you just heard there, we have a nice call for action from Mrs. Werner. And as she mentioned, rail is already the greenest mobility choice, but not yet the preferred one. So it's really our joint mission today, in the coming months ahead, to collectively develop and support R&I projects, which will ensure it becomes so. On that note, it's now my pleasure to invite Mr. John Clorin, Senior Expert at the European Commission's Directorate General for Research and Innovation, to add a few welcoming words.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I would like to join Elisabeth Werner in wishing you a very warm welcome on this Info Day. The Commission is a complicated organization. So I work for DG RTD, and Elisabeth Werner has a team in DG Move, and both teams are sponsoring, so to say, co-sponsoring the Shift2Rail program. Also for us in DG RTD, we are the ones that are, let's say, the service responsible for the European framework programs on research and development. Also for us, rail research has the potential for an enormous amount of innovations. So we are sponsoring, we are supporting it, and we will continue for the foreseeable future to sponsor this. In the spring of this year, our service, this DG RTD, underwent quite a major reorganization, and the rail and road research have now been merged with the urban file, so research on greening the cities and making cities more attractive. And that's also important for you as a sector, not to forget about the urban side of rail transport. Maybe not in 2020, the actions we will not shift too much, but for the future afterwards, for sure, we will see this shift. In the proposal for Horizon Europe, as you probably have heard of, climate, energy and transport are linked into one single big challenge. It's not a surprise, also with what is happening on the globe in terms of climate, that this challenge about transport, about energy, all linked to climate, is by far the biggest and most important and urgent challenge that we will have in Horizon Europe, and it's also probably the biggest challenge the Commission will have. Rail research, development and innovation will play, of course, and I will not be I'm not the first and I will not be the last one today saying this. It will play a very prominent role in the transition towards a climate neutral Europe. Rail transport has a pivoting role in clean urban mobility, in clean transport of heavy goods, and it provides climate neutral alternatives to longer distance travel. Werner von Siemens and his contemporaries probably did not have climate change in mind when they started electrifying trains and trams in the last quarter of the 19th century. But electrification provided rail transport now a unique position in the climate debate, and it gives rail transport now a momentum as we have not seen since for a long time. You don't need batteries to run trains. However, this momentum comes with new high expectations. You don't get a free lunch by having the momentum. Exactly because railways are climate friendly, we need more of it. Capacity, reliability, safety, attractiveness, affordability, and full climate neutrality are all objectives you collectively have to work on. We have started preparing this Horizon Europe. I just mentioned what challenges we have. We look at Shift to Rail now. What does it cover? How does it function? Who are involved? What are the results? And what needs to be improved? It is important to realize Shift to Rail started only a couple of years ago, and the first results are now gradually becoming available, and things look very promising. The catalogue of solutions, I will not be the last one mentioning it today, I'm sure, is there for the sector, and deployment should follow soon. Before Shift to Rail, looking back, EU-funded research was mainly conducted through individual projects with very limited synergy between those projects. Now with Shift to Rail, we have not only significantly increased our investments and your investments, but we have created the opportunity to build a through community and to work with different projects and consortia on common goals. You as participants and stakeholders also need to adapt your mindset to this new reality. It's a very important thing that you no longer use mindset of, okay, now I get the money and I do what I want with it. This is the past. In a way, the preferences of individual researchers and the direct innovation needs of individual companies can no longer prevail the common needs and expectations we have from the rail industry. By participating to a call, you commit yourselves to the multi-annual action plan, which is now finally becoming finalized, as I understand, and to the governance structure of Shift to Rail. In other words, you will be controlled. It's no longer in your individual hands to do what you want. I cannot repeat this more often. Today you will hear about all the ins and outs of the 2020 calls of Shift to Rail. I would also like to take this opportunity to remind you to keep an eye on the Mobility for Growth calls, which in some ways are accompanying the joint undertakings like Shift to Rail, which form part of the work program for Smart Green Integrated Transport Challenge. There are actually quite a few topics in 2020 that may be interesting for you. None of those topics are exclusively targeting rail research, but they cover issues of cross transport sector nature, and so they are of relevance to the rail sector as well. I will mention 7 of those. Cities as a multimodal nodes for smart and clean mobility. Network and traffic manager of future mobility. So you can look at the management of mobility cross mode. Coordination and support of an integrated freight transport and logistics system. You can imagine that a rail belongs to that. The effects of automation on transport labor force. Future conditions, working conditions and skills requirement. Also there, the rail sector should be represented in the proposal submitted there. Digitalization of the transport system with data sharing. Also there you can imagine rail. Advanced research method and tools in support of transport and mobility. And then the last one, number 7, the European mobility culture of tomorrow, reinventing the wheel. It's about how people perceive transport. Talking about the future, as said, discussions are currently still ongoing on the so-called multi-annual financial framework, which is the backbone of what the European Commission can do in the next 7 years. This week, there are two important events. Tomorrow, Commission President von der Leyen will outline further details of the Green Deal proposal, which is very, very relevant for the future of rail research, on how much money actually goes in that direction, for instance. And the day after tomorrow, we have also something that probably you all know. It's election day in the UK again. So, these events will also mean that in the coming months, and also the fact that we finally have a new commission, we should gradually get more clarity on how much money there will be for Horizon Europe, how much money there will be for climate, transport and energy, how much for rail-related actions, etc. But also the new Shift to Rail joint undertaking will be called Institutionalized European Partnerships, that's the new title, or perhaps in another format, will be worked on. The concept of the current joint undertakings is under discussion. For Shift to Rail specifically, we want engagement of as much stakeholders as possible. We are looking at urban transport, as I mentioned. We give strong attention to freight, but we are also looking at reinforcing the engagement of the railway operators and infrastructure managers, who will have, in a number of cases, access to considerable national financing in the coming years. So we would like to align them. We hope the whole sector will be convinced that doing things at a European scale is the way forward. I know there is a busy day ahead, so we will not use too much time of you. As Elisabeth Werner already said, listen attentively, consider the possibilities, think about your strengths and potential partners that can complement your skills, and take the opportunity to talk to other potential candidates, but also, of course, question the skillful colleagues with the blue ribbon of Shift to Rail. The last thing I want to say is to wish you a very successful event, and of course, lots of success in the calls in the coming year. And thank you for your attention. Thank you.
Can we just take the questions? Thank you so much, John, for those forward-looking words. Are there any questions for John at this stage? From the audience, we have some microphones circulating. If you would like to ask a question.
I will be around. Huh?
Okay, brilliant. Okay, excellent. Thank you very much. Okay, then I think we can now then move on to our next session, which I believe will be a very interesting discussion with two key figures in the European rail community. I would like to welcome Shift to Rail's Executive Director, Carlo Borghini, and Mr. Joseph Doppelbauer, Executive Director of the European Union Agency for Railways. Thank you.
Good morning. So unfortunately, we are a bit less than we expected. Joseph, please take a seat.
Thank you very much.
So I have really the great honor to sit here together with Joseph. We thought that would have been nicer to have a chat with Joseph and instead of having an interview or having him making a presentation. I don't think I need to introduce Dr. Doppelbauer. He has a huge experience in railway, and not only, because if I'm correct, you came from also the telecommunication industry initially. So now he's in a key position as Executive Director of the European Agency for Railways. And I will start from there because I think this is the the key question that everyone has. You are 6 months down, almost, the experience of this new role that was given by the fourth railway package to the agency. Which is your experience now? How you think it will evolve, considering also that by 2020 we'll have all the member states within the remit of the agency and authorization of the agency?
Well, thank you very much, Carlo, for this question. And it is, of course, a very pertinent question also for the scope of Shift to Rail and the railway system in general. It's about creating the single European railway area, and we are, since 16th of June, so almost 6 months now, European authority, initially only for 8 member states, because the member states were given the choice to ask for 1-year extension, so we have now only the Netherlands, France, Italy, Slovenia, Romania, Bulgaria, Greece and Finland. So these are the 8 countries of the first wave. I checked the figures yesterday. In terms of vehicle authorization, we have slightly above 300 valid applications in the one-stop shop. We have already made 260 decisions, and there are already 3,500 vehicles that circulate the European railways with an authorization for ERA. 3,500. So for us, this process of authorization has become very quickly routine. And we have, and I believe this is the core of your question, we have already some lessons learned. The first lesson learned is that we have now a transparency of what is happening in Europe that has never existed before, because for these 8 member states, we see all activities directly in the one-stop shop. Every morning when I'm in the office at 9 a.m., I get a briefing and we know what is happening. The second, and I believe also very positive aspect, is that we have created a teamwork between the agency and the national authorities, and the national authorities between themselves. It's quite natural when you work together and when you have to come to a joint decision that after some time you get to know each other and you develop a common approach. And for me, this is one of the most important aspects, and also linking back to Shift to Rail. I heard in John's speech the notion of teamwork, the notion of information sharing, and I believe that is one of the roles that is also played by the Shift to Rail joint undertaking.
Thank you, Joseph. You already tackled it, and also John, he mentioned it before. These changes that have been introduced by the fourth railway package, this new role, we are talking about thousands of vehicles already ready there in the market. Our objective is to achieve the single European railway area, and I would like to put a concept that is not only from the technological point of view, but to have a real high-speed network in Europe, that connecting center of economy and capitals, to have a real continental rail freight business, and so on and so on. So which are, in your opinion, the changes? Because here we have the people that will answer our call. So which are the changes that you, as executive director of the agency, would like to see coming from the work we are doing in Shift to Rail?
Well, when we look at the railway system, and Elisabeth put it very precisely with the preferred mode of transport, and that means there is a choice of transport modes. If we compare the transport modes, aviation, automotive, maritime, and rail, the essential difference is that rail is the only transport mode that does not have global rules. So we don't have a European railway system. We have a Belgian system, we have a Dutch system, we have a French system, we have a German system, and we lack cross-border connections. I am a personal victim, because when I have to come here from Valenciennes, there is no direct railway connection, so I usually go by car to Mons, and then from Mons I take the train. Now, we have several contributions from Shift2Rail. The first contribution is to create the spirit of Europe, the spirit of collaboration and Shift2Rail. I am now the second one referring to the catalog of solutions, but these solutions should be European solutions. So that's number one. Number two is, if we look into the needs of the European railway system, we have the basics. And the basics is we need to build infrastructure. We need to build bridges. We need to build or rebuild cross-border connections. We then need to build the infrastructure for signaling, and then, of course, advanced traffic management. So the next essential contribution that Shift2Rail can make is to make the railway system affordable, because rail has, as a consequence of being fragmented, also the disadvantage that it is a very expensive system. It's an expensive system not only because of the infrastructure needed, but it is also an expensive system because of the fragmentation in the different solutions. So Shift2Rail can introduce better, cheaper solution and can advance to more efficient processes such as digitalization. So that's an essential contribution, making the railway system more efficient, cheaper, and hence make it more attractive for the passengers and the freight operators.
One of the issues that also Elisabeth mentioned and John mentioned is, and start with the catalog solution, and you referred it now, the catalog solution is moving rail research innovation results to solutions that should go to the market. But still we know that we have barriers to bring innovation in the rail system. We have barriers to go in the market. How you think, in your position and in your experience, really, because you have been dealing with big companies from the manufacturing side, how you think we can bring down this barrier? Which are the elements that we maybe need to work also together as agencies, sister agencies, to help the market to accelerate the innovation process?
Well, I see at this question from two angles. The first question is that, of course, in a network, in an interconnected network like rail, innovation has always some restrictions. You cannot simply put out of service, say, the Belgian railway system during 6 months in order to introduce a new technical solution. So the question for an innovation is always whether it is a hard innovation or whether it's a soft innovation. I'll give you two examples. Having, and I saw it in the catalog of solution, having a new automated door system which makes the access for passenger easier is a local solution for each train, and it's a soft innovation because nothing prevents an operator to introduce it. There is other ideas, and we discussed it many years ago when we prepared Shift2Rail, the self-steering train. A very interesting concept, because then you would avoid the maintenance of the most expensive parts in the infrastructure, the switches, because they no longer exist. But this is a very hard innovation, because as soon as you take out the first classical switch, a conventional train can no longer run. So despite all the advantages, despite the savings that it might have for infrastructure maintenance, I'm afraid this innovation will never materialize, at least not in the brownfield application. So that's the one side. So we need to see what is the characteristic of each innovation. And actually, one should focus on those innovations that have the potential of moving in the market. The other side is, of course, that there are real barriers. And the barriers have, in many cases, to do with the role of the agency, with the authorization, with getting the necessary stamps to be admitted for operation. And here we have already created some possibilities in the regulation. The first is, of course, to foresee the possibility for innovative solutions in the TSI. The second one is to globally promote a risk-based approach, meaning when you introduce a change, you need to first and foremost assess the risks and not the compliance with certain rules. Because if a rule prescribes that you need to apply a certain technology, per definition, an innovative solution has no chance. So from that perspective, we need to work very closely together to eliminate those barriers, and we should rather help to bring new solutions in the market than to keep them out.
Do you have any question? Do you have any question for Dr. Doppelbauer? Don't be shy. I don't think you have the occasion to speak with him so often.
Yeah.
No? Okay, I will continue in this case. We talked a lot, and the Commission presented the one vision for the CCS in the conference that ERA organized in October. We talk a lot about architecture, we talk a lot about the different input coming from groups of stakeholders. Which is your view on how the architecture should evolve in the railway? Do you think how we are able to bring together the sector? How you see that? Do we need to have, you mentioned before, do we need to go in the direction of having at the end somehow an ICAO for railway or IATA or something that it brings together at global level, because at the end the railway is local but is a global business, to bring together standards in a view of being capable to accelerate innovation around the world and provide opportunity for also the competitiveness of our European industry.
Well, from the end, I agree with you that we need to come to a global railway area. Because simply if we look at the freight situation in Europe, most of rail freight is now coming from the east, from the Far East, and it crosses several regulatory regimes. From all practical terms, I believe you, Shift to Rail, European Commission, ERA, we of course need firstly to work on creating the single European railway area, and also to make what we do in Europe, the TSIs, the CSMs, the global reference. Now, coming back to why it is important to discuss architecture and to discuss standardization. I gave you the example of local or global soft and hard innovation. When you have a living system, a living complex system of systems, you can only innovate, you can only evolve that system if you have defined interfaces defining the boundaries of modularity. So modularity is a precondition to make your innovation and your research results effective. It's an example that we can import from other industries. You mentioned aviation, but it is the same in telecoms, it's the same in IT. So we need to jointly define what are the boundaries of modularity in order to make the living system more efficient.
The modularity is something really interesting because, as you said, there's an opportunity coming from other sectors. If I would be a CEO of one of the company here who is selling today black boxes or closed boxes, I would be a bit scared to a certain extent to undertake a complete different type of path. So we are preaching it, but how we are able to convince the CEOs to say, okay, this is the way to do. And it's not a question also of volume, so it's not going back to the idea of we should create a new market effectively around this type of concept. And would this request also to think about a new business model? We're talking about automation, we're talking about autonomous activity, we are talking, John mentioned the urban where largely automation is present. So all these working together expose, if you want, the European manufacturing industry to certain risk. It can create cost from the other side for the operator for the integration of this system. So which is our role, or how you see it as our role to not create too much uncertainty around these concepts?
Well, let me start from the beginning, and you mentioned it. Clearly, modularity will impact the business model. It will impact the business model of the railway operators, and it will, for sure, heavily impact the business model of the manufacturers. And essentially, there will be two choices for the manufacturer. The one is to produce these standardized modules in quantity and in quality, and to compete essentially on price and quality. That's the one opportunity. The other opportunity will be, of course, to be a service provider that creates solutions out of these modules, taking over some of the tasks from the railway undertakings. I believe that we can gradually introduce modularity. It is not disruption that has to be at the same time for everything. You mentioned ERTMS. There we have already some standardized interfaces. Some are missing, but we can work, and there are several initiatives in the area of ERTMS. We can gradually introduce the modularity, and the modularity will have for the user of the railway system, the benefit of lower cost normally, higher quality, and more rapid evolution to a new technical standard. One of the consequences of the fragmentation of rail is the long innovation cycle, normally 25 years in rail. Yeah? If we just look back, every one of you, I bet, has a smartphone in their pocket. Before 2007, it did not exist. So we have 12 years, and just imagine what has changed, how many iPhones, generations of iPhones. I believe we are now at 11 or 12. So one generation per year, and in rail, we have 25 years. So modernization will also give us the possibility to accelerate where is needed. Because if I have a car body, I don't need to change my car body every year. If I have a bogie, I can also live with a longer lifetime of this component. But if I have a passenger information system, then I want to go with the technology evolution. So it is very clear that we are at an important change of mindset, which brings opportunities, but as always, the challenging bad news for the industry is that the current business model is possibly not to survive.
John mentioned before, well, we have a new commission that started on 1st of December. We expect tomorrow the new president, von der Leyen, presenting the Green Deal. We saw documents in Politico and other newspaper mentioning that 75% of transport has to move from trucks, and between brackets was written aviation, to railway and inland waterways. Today, you mentioned we have an innovation life cycle of 25 years, but I think the expectation of the president will be not 25 years. I think we'll have 7 years to deal with it, because at the same time, the European Union is investing in batteries heavily, and maybe new mode of transport. So how we can combine these objectives? 75% is a huge amount. I'm not sure that if this will happen in the next 2-3 years, we'll be able to cope with it. How we can push the sector to take this in a manner that will change rapidly to this type of targets. And this is really something that, well, the two of us as responsible of two European agencies, we have a particular duty, but obviously it will not happen without the people we have here and the people of our members and so on and so on.
Well, first of all, let me try to ground this objective of 75% in reality. So current market share in freight is 17%, average in Europe. If we look at some member states, the Baltics, we are in the 50-60%. If we look at the Alpine countries, we are also 30-40%. If we look into some Western European countries, we are in the low single digit. And then we need to see how quickly we can bring freight back to rail. And there again, we need to work up the pyramid, because we have no sidings anymore. We have no shunting yards anymore. We have no business relations anymore. We have neglected investment in rail freight over many years. We have the problem of the long waiting times at borders. Just an example, last year there was a conference here in Brussels where a speaker from China said that now they can run a train from China to Duisburg in Germany in 10 days, and a train from Duisburg in Germany to Madrid takes 7 days. And I'm sure most of these 7 days is not running on the track, it's waiting on the borders. So there is a lot of work to be done, and I believe 7 years will be very, very challenging. And then coming back to your last point, the investment. Clearly, electric trucks, battery-operated electric trucks will be a major competition to rail freight. And currently, of course, the target of electric trucks is more urban because of the limited reach. But if the reach of these electric trucks is increased to several hundred kilometers, then it will be a very serious and very difficult to beat competition for rail. And just compare the 500 or 400 something million funding for Shift to Rail with several billions for battery. We also need to ask the political level to put the money where the mouth is. And if they want a Green Deal and if they want a model shift, they have to invest.
Thank you. I have a couple of questions. I know that you have a meeting afterwards, but I have a last two questions. ERTMS, we have a European Deployment Action Plan 2023-2030. When I go around in different member states, and I think you have the same, I was in one country with Lea, I don't mention it, and they told us, well, we are investing to deploy in the future 5 to 10 years, ERTMS level 1. And this is a question that we are in another region in the Balkans, and they told us we invest in ERTMS level 1. And we are targeting ERTMS level 3. So which action we should do to bring the European rail system at a baseline that is level 2, where we can hook all the new technologies, the game changers, and so on and so on?
Well, my personal view, and I know that there are some employees of the agencies here who know my view, I believe investing in level 1 is not the good direction, because it is expensive, it reduces the capacity, and it also is backwards looking by maintaining the old national signaling system. If we don't exploit the advantages of a radio system, if we don't exploit the possibility of moving intelligence on the train, we are blocking a major innovation highway, and we are wasting the money in the wrong place. Just some figures to think about. Yeah, we have currently 2.6% of the 217,000 kilometers of European track fitted with ERTMS. It's around 3,000 kilometers. If we take the current pace of deployment, it will take 500 to 700 years to complete all the 217,000 kilometers. On the other hand, we have with GSMR in some countries 99%, in others 95%, 90%. So we have a very high coverage of radio already. And in terms of vehicles fitted with ERTMS, we have more than 10,000 vehicles out of 60,000. So we have 16% of the vehicles. And I believe, and this is something where Shift2Rail can again contribute, we should exploit those facts to quicker deploy forward-looking ERTMS solutions, radio-based, level 2, level 3, which open up the route towards innovation, which will bring higher efficiency, which will enable ATO, and so on and so forth.
Last question. I know that John was really extremely cautious about the future of Shift2Rail and the next research and innovation program, but let me say, well, we are working to have it, and I believe that is one of the key components also for the Green Deal. Which will be your expectations? I believe that in Shift2Rail 2, whatever it will be, the name is not important, but it's clear to everyone. In Shift2Rail 2, we need to have a dedicated chapter also to ensure that we have a stronger link with the agency, to have to be able to answer faster requests of research that are coming in the future role of also the agency as is evolving. What do you like to see in Shift2Rail 2? What do you think we should have as a target? There are some colleagues also of different land-guided systems. I don't mention the names, but what would you like to see?
No. First of all, my expectation is that Shift2Rail continues to create the ecosystem, a communication platform, an exchange platform for ideas, and then I believe we need to shift in two directions. The one direction is clearly digital, because we need to fully bring the potential of digitalization into rail. And the second one is multimodal integration. And of course, the two are not separate, because the multimodal integration will predominantly go via digital. It's an absolute must also, coming back to the targets that you mentioned for modal shift. If rail is not well integrated with the other transport modes, we can never achieve the targets for modal shift.
Thank you very much, Joseph. Do you have any question for Dr. Doppelbauer?
Yeah.
I don't see, well...
Yeah, it's difficult to see. Last row.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning, citizens. Angelos Harlaftis, Epafos Advisors. We represent here the EcoWaves movement, the Pan-European and Mediterranean movement, which is based in direct democracy, in science and in ecology. The question is for the European citizens and the Mediterraneans, when are we going to apply the maglev technologies on the research area, which already our competitors are using them, maybe in an experimental mode, but they are investing a lot. Thank you.
Well, if you refer to maglev, this has been a technology that is around since the 1960s, and you know that there were certain test tracks in Europe which further to some accidents were closed down some 10 years ago. There is one live maglev in China, Shanghai, and apparently there is some investments going on in the Far East, in China and in Japan, in order to further develop maglev. Now, the point with maglev is, again, firstly, a fair comparison of the cost versus benefit. And the second point is, and this is, by the way, the reason why, for instance, a project of having a maglev between Berlin and Hamburg failed, you can not easily go into the city centers because of the unavailability of space, and it doesn't integrate well with the existing system. We can quote another historic example in France. In the 60s and 70s, there existed a system called Aerotrain, and you can still see the vestige, the remainders, when you go to Orléans. Was an approach that was based on proven technologies, on mainly technologies from aviation. They could even, unlike some other hypothetical hyped transport modes, they had real vehicles that could run at 450 kilometers, but it lost the battle against the TGV, because from the beginning the TGV could run also the destination that were outside the narrow high-speed line. So the integration with the existing system is the major drawback for maglev, and again, the cost to invest in that technology would be much higher, and the benefits would not be enough. And by the way, there would not be any significant advantage in travel time, in comfort whatsoever, against a high-speed train.
Maybe if I can complement the answer, I think maybe it is time to relook in the business case. But it doesn't change what Joseph has just said. I think we most probably will end up in the same assessment, but maybe there is a need, because as Joseph was saying, China, Japan, also in the US, they are looking into the question again. But the major advantage of the current high-speed connection is the integration, yes, and the full integration in the network. And if we are capable to bring in all the advantages that we bring with through research innovation and through ERTMS solution, most probably it will be extremely difficult to have other systems coming in not connected to the system. From the research point of view, nevertheless, I think having an assessment of the potential and the risk opportunity in this sector can be also looked at. And we see how it's going. So I know that you need to go. You have the time for a last question?
Yeah, I have still some 10 minutes.
Any other question from the public? Yeah. Can we provide the micro?
Paul Tobak from Belgian Railways. Mr. Doppelbauer, do you sincerely believe that cross-border traffic is an economical problem, and a technical problem, or a political one?
Well, I start with the last one. I believe it's a political one. And again, quoting as an example the situation Valenciennes to Brussels. Yeah? The railway line existed historically. It was shut down. Now, I understood that on the Belgium side, there was some intentions to reopen the line, but these intentions were not shared on the French side. So I believe it's entirely a political discussion. And Carlo mentioned earlier the objective to link all the major cities in Europe with a rail connection. And of course, we have already some high-speed rail connection. Brussels is very well positioned because you can link Amsterdam, Paris, London, Köln, Frankfurt. So there are already some links, but other connections simply do not exist. And the first barrier that needs to be overcome is the political will to build these connections. Of course, then you need money, which is again a political decision. The technical problem comes last, because referring back to Valenciennes-Mons, I spoke with one company that manufactures the track building machines. They say they will take 6 hours to build the 800 meters of train. So this is not the problem.
Yeah, I think also is a question of maybe looking also the business model behind these type of things, because we have always considered railway as a public funded organization, but now we should look at which is the return on investment, especially if you are capable to transform in a positive business, thank you to the shift that you want to bring from other modes of transport and to the...
Let me just make one remark and just follow up of this question. I had several discussions with ministries and railway undertakings in several countries. The usual argument is 95% of our traffic is domestic, so we don't need international connections. And it is, of course, the chicken and egg. If there is no possibility to use the train, people don't use it. And because people don't use it, you don't have a market, and then you conclude that it doesn't show a positive business case. But possibly as from next year, we will see some new high-speed connections, cross-border high-speed connections, where we can see whether there is a market or not. And I'm looking forward to really seeing those developments.
And also with the market pillar of the fourth railway package, maybe we start to see high-speed operator not only doing the cross-border, but going to deal with other markets, like, for example, in Italy today we have already with NTV and FSI group. And maybe this model will be exported somewhere else.
Well, in Spain, they have just announced that they will have 3 operators. Interestingly, one is owned by the Italians and the other one is owned by the French. So, but it is a start.
So this will be really a major change. That last question, and we have a new commission. We will meet soon, I believe, the new commissioner also to discuss with her the priorities. Which you think will be the key priority you want to bring forward for the agency?
Well, the key priority for the agency is very clearly that we need to manage the full transition to the fourth railway package over the next 2 to 3 years. We need to fully change from the present system, national authorities, national rules, national processes, into European rules, European processes, European authority. It will be the first priority. And on that basis, we then need to move forward towards the 2 angles that I mentioned before, digitalization and integration with multimodality. So that will be the 3 topics that I will put on the agenda.
Thank you very much, Joseph. Thank you very much for your participation today. We are working with the agency hands in hands and together with the Commission. I think this is a starting point also for this new year. 2020 is the beginning of a new decade. I hope that we'll shape in a different manner together, and I'm really happy that you were available to come here today.
Many thanks, Carlo, for the invitation, and I wish all of you a very successful Info Day. Thank you.
A big round of applause to Joseph Doppelbauer.
Thank you, Carlo.